Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. Two people talking on the internet with each other, with our headphones and microphones in rooms that are a little bit too hot, so we may lose our thread a bit. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
Today we're going to talk about language.
Languages.
I feel like I'm surprised we haven't done this as a subject before, because it seems like one that, I certainly wouldn't want to talk about. So we're going to talk about Ruby, Python, JavaScript.
The hilarity,
silly programming languages.
That's a very interesting point, though.
Oh, I'm going to make it in the episode. We think in our language, don't we? It sort of changes the way you think a little bit. And you do notice that people that speak different languages tend to have a different sort of way of looking at the world, more so than people that are just from different places. Speaking lots of different languages, interesting. How many have you got?
75. No, I haven't.
75 languages.
There's lots of Balkan jokes, because if you speak whatever they used to call Serbo-Croat or Croatian, so Croatian, Bosnian, Serbian, Montenegrin, but they're all pretty much the same. But I'm very comfortable with German, and I have sort of, traveller's Spanish and traveller's Italian. My French is terrible, so I never got taught it, and I'm always really embarrassed because of all the countries in the world to not speak the language. I think France is the most tutted. Foreigner who can't speak French. It's like, I'm sorry, but I can talk to you. German, anyone?
So Ivanka's got lots of languages. I've just got mostly English and sort of some school French and German, and school French and English, Spanish, and then just been having a go at the. I was in German for a bit, but my Deutsch is not terrible, but not good enough for me to be brave enough to try and have a conversation in it. But anyway, so we'll just talk about what's the nature of language kind of conversation, isn't it?
It is.
It's that sort of thing.
What? Why is it such a big deal, this language business?
Exactly. Why? Before anything else, Ivanka, briefly, give us a little nugget about your personal reality.
Briefly?
Yeah.
Oh, God. This week we've been reading The Big Friendly Giant. The child has finally graduated to books with no pictures. Yeah.
Ooh.
It's exciting. So might be saying human being a lot.
Human being and sickable.
And language.
Disgusterous or whatever. All that sort of stuff.
Cumbers.
Roald Dahl.
Yeah, Roald Dahlish.
Dahlisms. Tweedalisms.
There you go, that'll do you. That's brief, innit?
There's brief and there's brief.
Okay, other things I've done. Other things that make me happy are... I don't know what else makes me happy.
Anything making you angry?
Just the general climate apocalypse. That makes me angry every day. And more and
what
more...
about Boris Johnson?
I give up.
Do you know how that bus thing was just an SEO thing, wasn't it? It was just an SEO strategy. I'm going to talk about buses so that all my £350 million bus things go off the Google homepage.
Absolutely. He's a diabolical human being. Yeah. The Tory party are diabolical human beings. And I wish upon them some bad dreams from the BFG.
Bad dreams would be a good start.
Oh, that was the big for the negative column this week, not particularly environmentally related. In Hungary, they've put the academic institution that decides where they're investing their research money under the control of the government. So not scientists. So not scientists going, we are the Academy of Science, we are clever and have studied this stuff and we know where we should be looking and what we should be doing. And I know you and I have discussed this, it's not really neutral, but it can pretend to be interested in science for science sake. Whereas if it's under government control, it will inevitably be guided by policy. And the current policy is not very, shall we say, progressive.
Oh, well, one less country doing useful science then, I suppose. Luckily, hopefully India's going to come through with some cool stuff, all the cool stuff pretty soon, so we won't need them.
Then we can all just relax. How was your week, Michael?
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank you. This is the end of my first week of freedom. I think some things are ahead of schedule, like my explorations into the new the new Apple features, and some things are behind schedule, like my YouTube video, because unfortunately when you have a bit more time, the perfectionism can really seep in and you're like, is this just rubbish? Should I just start again? Am I going to spend yet another day this week on this thing that I just wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have it? But I've been having some I have not managed to finish this video, but I did have a good first chat with this person that wanted to do some stuff with Blank State, and that was good. And he seems very, on it, very smart. So we're thinking about doing some sort of interactive. He brought up Nicky Case and the sort of interactive explainer type thing. So I think we're going to try and do something like that. And then I'm feeling good about how it's going so far. And just speaking of Apple, I was just looking into, my hard disk space was running out, and I was just looking at, can you upgrade the SSD on this thing? And it was like, no, it's all just soldered to the motherboard now, and to replace the hard drive, you've got to replace the entire motherboard. And I really think these non-upgradable Macs that Apple are now that everything's just non-upgradable, I think it's just an absolute disgrace, and it's just making me more and more cross every time I think about it. This has got to change. It's not acceptable. At least that new Mac Pro has got proper bloody PCI slots again. It's not just some completely, a dustbin thing. But yeah, Apple, sort your lives out. I'm not going to humour you much longer. However, Swift UI, I think they've knocked it out of the park. And they've finally done something we've needed for years and years. I'm not going to talk about that. But you can write user interfaces in code instead of clicking on things and dragging things around now, officially, which is a fucking revelation. Right. We're talking about language.
We are.
We're talking about language in language. So immediately, it's going to be limited how much we can. Can you talk about language, using language? Aren't you implicitly constrained? Where do you want to start?
Well, I was going to start. I've been thinking about this quite a lot over the last few weeks because of our residence here in Croatia land, where the husband and the child are both learning the language. And I keep thinking about this TED Talk I saw ages ago, which is by a woman called Lera Boroditsky, and it's called How Language Shapes the Way We Think. And the reason I've been thinking about her is because in English, as a parent person, I'm constantly talking to telling my child not to do that because it's not kind. Don't do that. It's not kind. Oh, that was a very kind thing you just did. That was, it's nice to share. Oh, good, kind. I also teach her the British, when speaking English, I use a lot more please and thank you than I do when I'm speaking Croatian. So I find that my child, I think in general, Croats don't use pleases and thank yous and sorries as much. I've got and I can't really pick a word that really, really means what I think kind means. I don't know what that says about the Balkans.
It's a problem, isn't it? It's a problem.
I've had a few chats with a few people, and they talk about, there's a couple of words that kind of mean nice, or even don't do that, that's not beautiful behaviour. But that seems very passive and descriptive, whereas kind is a more active. Yeah. It's like when the English say nice, you get, oh, nice biscuits. It's nice. My dad used to go, nice. Very nice.
Was your dad Borat?
He was, yeah. It's a Slav accent.
Explains a lot.
Does, yeah. So, yeah.
No, just said that.
I was thinking about the fact that whenever you do a Croat English, because what my daughter has started doing is saying English words with a Croatian accent just for a laugh and going,
lovely.
Memory.
Memory.
But she also, to tell me to move out of the way, she doesn't go, excuse me, mummy. She's quite a polite English kid. Croatian, she just goes, makni, which is like, move. It's like, which
that's one thing I found, like, you know, when you're just like in public as an English person, like one of the word you use the most is, oh, sorry, excuse me. And then like going to Germany and just realizing, I'm like, how do you do that in German? And it's like, Entschuldigung. It's like 4 syllables. Yeah. What are you doing? Like, sort it out, sort your language out, and like you can sort of drop the N, like Entschuldigung. It's like, still, come on. Can't be saying that the whole time. No, so I'm just going to have to be ruder.
So, it's true. Same with Croatian. It's like, if you're, say excuse me or I'm sorry, you say ispričavam se. It's like, it's an essay. So we don't need that. But you can just say please. You can use please. You can do that in German as well as a shorthand. You could just go, you know, please, bitte. Please, bitte, molim, and then. But anyway, So I've been enjoying the cultural difference. So the reason I thought about this TED Talk was one of the things this woman was talking about. She'd studied a particular Aboriginal tribe, and they don't talk about left or right. They talk about south, southeast, south, southwest, north, northeast. And because if they ask you how you are, if you ask somebody, hello, how are you? Your answer needs to be, I'm north, northeast, or whatever. I'm misremembering the details, but it's about direction. And the fact that they use north, south, east, west to describe everything means that they are actually much better at orientating themselves. So they always know where north and south are. Okay. Because from the moment you were born and started talking, you had to answer in north, south, east, west. So therefore, you have a very strongly developed sense of direction, which humans aren't meant to have. We're not meant to have an instinctive, like we haven't got magnets that point to the North Pole or something. This was her.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I've got a reasonable sense of direction. I think a stereotype-defying sense of direction, you'll find.
I meant that I've got magnets, but I have a terrifying. It's very easy for me to get turned around. Like before GPS, really? I just got lost every day.
Well, I'm actually quite good at knowing how to get places and stuff. So that I found very interesting. And then she talked about, there were other examples of how, let's say in German, a bridge is feminine. In Spanish, it's masculine. So Germans will describe, but it might be the other way around. What is a bridge? I can't remember now. Brücke. So it's like
eine Brücke. That's feminine.
So it's like so it's like when you're describing a bridge in German, you'll use words like elegant and beautiful, whereas if in Spanish you'll then attribute typically masculine, so it's strong and it's big, and that kind of thing. So it's like
Spanish for bridge.
I can't remember now.
Well, I've got to know. So bridge in Spanish, because I learned it. Puente.
Anyway, so the point of this whole thing was how it makes you different. And then I was thinking about the fact that, and then there's saying like, the more languages you speak, the more souls you have, and all this kind of thing so one of the things I've been...
You rush that out, the more souls you have.
Yeah, like... Yeah, well, that's... Essentially, like you're different people.
Yeah.
And I think that's, pretty fair to say. I think that's why it's quite, why life for a migrant or somebody who's bicultural or multicultural, it can be like the some of these things don't sit comfortably with each other. So they kind of separate identities. Because if you're terribly... I do bring to Croatia my very polite, excuse me, do you mind? Can I? Please, would you mind passing me? But a typical Croatian interaction, like in the shop, this woman said, excuse, can I have that slice of that loaf of bread? And the shopkeeper passes it to her, and this woman picks up the bread, and she just was... And this is not like... Anyway, she just goes, not being funny, I could smack somebody over the head with this, and hands it back. She didn't say, excuse me, I think this bread's a bit old. I'm not going to buy it if you don't mind. I'm terribly sorry. Which would be your English kind of even if probably in England you'd buy it and throw it away rather than giving it back.
Racist.
It's true, though. I don't want to create a fuss. No, sorry. Anyway, I bought this bread. Don't worry. I'll make bread and butter pudding. It'll be fine. But this woman, people just talked. They're just more aggressive, and the language is more aggressive, I think. But this kind of like, I don't think it's particularly the language, and there's probably loads of Balkaneers out there that might go, Manky, you're being racist, but. Let's face it, it is a more aggressive part of the world. And I think that's reflected in the language. And when you start being all pleasy and thank you, people respond differently to you. But you also have to be prepared to go, Madam, please do not speak to me like that. As they go, tie your dog up. Excuse me?
There's got to be something a bit liberating about not having to
be manners,
frilly it up all the time. Just
it's a joy.
Fact, statement, direct. like we're not mucking about here. I mean, I wouldn't mind a bit of that sometimes. Let's not beat around the bush, so to speak. Have you got a favourite language? Because that's a good question with a lot of depth to it.
Oh, I've got a favourite language. Well, I think unlike programming languages, I think it's not like that.
Well, you say that, but I got into this Pimsleur approach, learning things for my German, and I sort of dipped into, and I just found it so beneficial for like picking up a language, that because it's all about like repetition and saying things and just saying normal stuff over and over again, which after like a year of like months of studying a textbook and all that kind of thing, I still didn't feel like if someone said how's it going I would have a clue. I wouldn't have it at the tip of my tongue. So but as part of that, I thought, well, let's try some other ones. So I tried a bit of Chinese, I tried Japanese, and like Italian as well. And the Italian, I just really love the Italian. Like, it just seemed to me to just be a more concisely and elegantly designed language than the other ones that I tried. Like even French and like even some of the Latin languages, like it just kind of gave me, it was like a favourite programming language situation. It was like, this is sort of like Ruby to like other, Java, English is Java or something. Like it just seems like, it seems efficient and sort of elegant in a way that it's not like this hodgepodge like English, which is just so many different things thrown into this cauldron. Or like German to me feels like it's sort of like they've sort of had a very particular, they've gone too far down like this really awkward route, and then there's all this complete stuff that you just can't guess at, like the articles and things like that. So you learn nouns, but then if you don't learn the article, you haven't actually learnt the noun. Like you need to remember to learn the D or das, all that stuff as well, which you just don't in other languages I've tried to learn. But yeah, like Italian, I need to get back into learning it, because every time we're in Italy and everyone's speaking Italian, I'm like, I really need to do that bloody Pimsleur so I can get involved.
That's hard.
So yeah, I ask because that is kind of my answer to that question. And I had this theory that maybe it's like a newer language than a lot of them, but I don't know if no one has ever confirmed that for me. So I think maybe it's just my perception of it. Yeah. It's like post-Latin, isn't it? Or like post-Roman Empire. It's like, I don't know. It just seemed like maybe it had been kind of come up with more recently.
But if you think about how Italian shapes, sort of how language changes behaviour and shapes the way you are, Italian's much more sing-song. Like the rhythm of it is much more. It's more, I don't know, dancey, musicy. Do you know what I mean? It's much more happy, I think. I grew up in a house
German
where my
just
mum
still sounds like swearing.
My mum and dad spoke German to each other. That was their common language. And there was many a time when my brother and I would go, Mummy and Daddy, stop arguing with each other. And they'd be like going, don't talk stupid.
We used to. Do you know that's a funny thing? I always, whenever I think about like parents like swearing in front of their children, because we can sort of talk about bad language here as well, but it overlaps in that. Like what in my childhood, I guess whenever they wanted to, they just would speak in German if they wanted to say something away from the kids, sort of thing. So I'm sure all the sort of gross sex stories and like swearing was done in German, and we were none the wiser. So we know. So like swearing was always much more of a shock to me, I think, as I got older, because I just hadn't really experienced it at home. I think if they needed to kind of like talk about something, it would just be like switch languages.
Well, my parents definitely did that, the switching languages thing, for sure. Because when they met, they only spoke German was literally their common language, and then they learnt each other's languages. But they almost never spoke to each other. Their natural response was to speak to each other in German. But they definitely, if they wanted to hide something from us, which is why I ended up learning German, because I don't like it when I don't know what's going on. So I didn't actively learn it. I picked it up as a child, just out of pure nosiness or curiosity or whatever, or big earsness, as my mum would very lovingly tell me.
Big earsness.
Big ear. Oh, oi, big ears. Off you, It took him a while to realise that I actually had picked up German. But going back to what's your favourite language, there's also some languages, some sounds are really fun to say. Like there's loads of Spanish words that are just in Italian that are just like, like I was teasing about oh, che bella bambina, that sort of like, oh, da boo, it's just nice. And when you can say them and use them in a sentence appropriately in context, it's like, hey, check me, I've got a... I just said the right thing at the right time. But I'm not as obsessed with the, where you said about the der, die, das and all that business for German. I am my focus with language learning. I've never really properly book learned a language. I've picked them up as a result of circumstance, and I'm not sure that I'm very good at learning languages in a follow the chapter 1. How do you do? But
who is?
It's not. I'm just saying that I've never. It's not really. But then I don't care about the grammar. I care about being understood.
Well, that's the difference between you and me. I am. But the reason I'm not going to speak German is because I want to get it. I want to get it right, and I don't know that that's. One of my dad's stories is telling, about them overhearing me in my cot when I thought I was on my own, just practicing speaking, like practicing how to say things. And like I didn't talk until I came out with a full sentence. Like, would you mind not throwing me so high, Father? Or I don't know, something like that. But so I don't know if it's like perfectionism or narcissism that I just don't feel like I want to talk in a language if I can't like nail it. But for me, it's like it's important that precision is really important to me. Like I need to know the rules before I break them. Certainly.
Like when it comes to language, I am the absolute opposite of that. I want to make people. What I want to do is I really enjoy making people laugh. If I don't, like just that sort of. Not like I'm in a comedian way, but like just I don't know. I just like talking to people. That is really it. And I think for most people, it's like watching my daughter now start to speak Croatian because she's been around it all her life. She responds appropriately in English to Croatian and has done for her whole life, but has never really wanted to speak it. And there's a few people around here, and a lot of people here understand English, so she hasn't had to, and she's really why would you? Why would I? Yeah. Why would I speak pidgin Croatian when I can speak proper English? And then, we've got a family friend who really doesn't speak English, and she knows she doesn't, and so she's starting to speak to her properly. But she's basically stringing sentences together of 4 or 5 words that are just the word, noun, verb. So, and it's like they're not correct. Croatian's got 7 cases, but you can understand what she's trying to say. And that's really all. And then as soon as you start getting a response, as soon as you start conversing, your spoken language will improve. There's no...
Of course. I mean, the situations I've been in has tended to be where the other person can speak English anyway, so probably better than I'm going to be able to speak German. So it's like, I would rather just like not look stupid and talk English. If we can communicate, like obviously if it is, no, I think when someone doesn't speak the language, it can seem like they're not that bright. Like it's just a fact, I think it's not very fair. Like if you're struggling for the vocabulary words, like you can't participate.
But if this is your second, third, fourth language.
Yeah, no, but if I'm talking about, someone if you're in an office trying to sort of get something done and someone doesn't really even have enough vocabulary to participate, it's frustrating. Even if they're the smartest person in the world, like you need the language to be able to get anywhere.
Yeah, but I think obviously, with the heat at the moment, neither of our vocabularies and our abilities to string sentences together at our best. I hope we don't sound too stupid. But if you're just like when we were doing that motorcycle trip and we were in South America, we got into Mexico and we did 2 weeks living with a Mexican family and we went to school for a week. To learn Spanish, and obviously we were kind of getting along, bumbling along quite well, and then we left the family, and like the first restaurant we got to and we were ordering some food and it's like Nick, how'd you say it again? What did he say? What? Because you've got to tune your ears in as well, and you've got to even be listening to the language and to pick out the words that you do know or might know or how they might hang together. But you can't really travel South America without Spanish. So the more you just walk in and go, hola, and then style it out, like my Spanish got quite good by the end of it because we just go for it, I think. One of the things that I think we didn't cover when we talked about countries and nationalism and stuff is how much, when you don't understand a language and what people are talking about, how alienating and upsetting that can feel.
Yeah, and just generally stressful, just coming back and not having to be worried about ordering in a restaurant in German. Like, it was after a year of just always being, oh, God, I've got to try. They might talk German and I might have to do it. And then just being like, I can just go into a shop and that's not a problem anymore. It was just such a relief and just made me, I certainly appreciated that for a few months. I was like, it's one less thing to worry about.
My worst place for trying to make myself understood was China, because I backpacked in China for a couple of months when I finished uni with my mate Paul. And the most disastrous meal we had on the... Because Chinese I just struggled with enormously. I'd say something, the people would correct me. I couldn't even hear the correction. Like, what? Yeah. That's just what I said. That's what I just said. But, I learned thank you and I got very good at sign language conversations. And then we had this phrase book, and what we were trying to say was, whatever you bring us, we don't want any dog and we don't want any rat, because we were in an area that apparently does serve dog. We were like, I don't want dog and I don't want noodles. We got some sort of noodle thing, so neither of us ate it. We were like, no. But, it's just so, you feel like such an... either you're scared, I think, either it can be scary to not understand what everyone is talking about, and it can be, especially like when we first got to Mexico,
covered on podcasts. People had wound us up so much, we were just terrified. Yeah, we're not really terrified, but on edge. What are these people doing? But it's like, it's intimidating to. Well, that's the thing. Like when someone's got a secret language that you can't understand, that's why that's what Farage is whinging about. Like people talking foreign on a train, that like having some big issue with it. It's probably a defining moment for his racism, but like, they probably weren't talking about you. get over it. Like, it's dangerous. It's dangerous not to speak the language. Like, so much of our existence is about communicating between each other, that if you cannot speak, it's dangerous for you there. Like, you don't know what they're saying, what they're arranging between themselves. Like, right, you put the thing over their heads, I'll shove them in the van, we'll go and, it's like, I don't know what you're saying. So, yeah, it's very dangerous to be somewhere and not speak the language, I think.
Yeah.
Well, depending.
Can be. But,
Can be, probably.
Can be, yeah, maybe. I think it's quite... it's also weirdly narcissistic to think that people on a train are speaking about you. Though I can confirm that if I'm ever speaking foreign on a train, it's because I'm speaking about somebody on the train.
Well, maybe Nigel was right after all. So another thing about language, another topic I would say is translation. And I think we can talk about technology and the role in there, because, like, I think the boundaries are coming down. Those language barriers are coming down. And I think we're kind of getting closer and closer to just like a real-time interpreter thing. And I think if you went to another country now, you can just literally use like Google Translate to kind of, you speak into it, they speak into it, you speak into it. And like, even when I was in, Japan in like 2012, it was still that you had someone lost their camera, and it like literally had this form where you had to draw pictures of, you had to like draw a picture of a camera, like just fill in all these boxes to try and communicate what was going on. So just in the last decade, even, things have come so far. Just like you can hold your phone up to some, to another language, and it'll just translate it right there. But what I do think is interesting is like Douglas Hofstadter's book, which I've mentioned before, the Tombeau Marrow, which I was quite a significant one in my reading when I was younger, is just all about translating this poem. And it's just about the fact that, and it's sort of about machine translation as well, and just talking about how there is no one-to-one conformance between languages. Just forget about that. And so, like, meaning is so, like, especially if it comes to poetry or something, like, how are you going to, like, this book is like, 120 different translations of this poem, and like a discussion of all the different, like, why it was different in all the different, why the different people approached it so differently. You can't just translate words and expect,
the same meaning,
what comes out, the same meaning to come out, especially when you start to sort of get idioms involved. Like, if you start to translate idioms, like the words of the idioms, like, well, you're just going to get nowhere. And in fact, even like when you're in another country, you can learn the language, but then people will just say some random sequence of words, that's some expression there that you'll just be like, what just happened? Like, it takes even longer to get all those.
That happens between cities, but yes, it does.
Yes.
There was something you made me think of. Oh yeah, if we do this, if we get this instant translation, are there going to be people like there are now go, oh no, I make mine from scratch. I speak languages from scratch. Like, it's going to be like a thing where you go, oh no, I never buy pasta. I always make mine from scratch. Be like, no, I don't. I never use the translator. I like to speak in the native.
I'm sure there will be. No, but I mean, I think it's like nothing's ever a replace. Like the technological solution is never a replacement for the thing that already existed. It'll just like rarefy into some. Probably like Nazis will start using it, and like it will go wrong, or language selfies will be invented, and like who knows what's going to emerge from that technology that we weren't expecting.
That's what we need. We need an episode on unintended consequences.
Unintended Consequences of Technology, I think, is a great episode title.
But it is the basic unit of human interaction, really. Oh, that's what it reminded me. But that's what I was going to talk about. Sign language. I think sign language is quite interesting on the subject of translating poems, because sign language, when you look at it, when you don't understand it, it seems to be all about conveying meaning. And so it's like it's sort of a sign language translator sort of acts out the words.
Yeah.
And it's just
gurns along.
Did you see that woman that was signed for Stormzy? She was doing grime for sure at the old, and she was like, she was really going for it. It's quite cool to watch. What I hadn't understood until I did a project with somebody who was deaf and who had interpreters, I never understood that sign language is also a natural language, like all the other languages we learn, so that there are complete differences. Just because you act out words physically, they're no less different in form than German and Croatian. So I hadn't realised that. So there'll be like pockets of people who are deaf creating language to talk to each other. That's how they all evolved.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess they are symbols. Like each kind of thing you're doing is a symbol, and then you're kind of sequencing those symbols together. There's no reason to think that two different people would come up with the same symbol for the same thing.
No, exactly.
Especially when it's like abstract concepts. Like the top. I read this thing about like the top 100 words in the English language. Like a lot of them aren't figurative. They're not representational of something in the real world. Like a lot of our words are, I think, I feel, like money, like abstract concepts that there isn't like a pictogram that you could draw for it. Which I always found like it sort of gives you a window into what humans are really like. We are a lot more abstract than, I think, if a dog had a language, it would just be like food bowl,
it'd be like cat,
rabbit. Yeah, like there wouldn't be much to it. Whereas we've got to represent all these abstract concepts.
I would be curious to know what the dog's top 100 concepts are.
Isn't it interesting how they translate? I don't know, like a dead language. It's just lost, isn't it? Like a obsolete data storage format. If you kind of lose the key, then I just don't know what the words mean. So like the Rosetta Stone is just like, I don't know.
Mysterious.
There's only so much statistical analysis you can do on that smaller sample of data.
In our world where we need everyone to love each other and be kind to each other, where there are so many languages that...
Yeah, how much of a problem is that lack of a common language? Is that, as I perhaps suggested in the previous episode, is that the biggest problem? Is that the thing that's dividing us more than anything else? Can you think of anything that's dividing us more than not speaking the same language? Yeah?
I think, past, as soon as you get past that person doesn't look like me, I think the next thing is I can't communicate with them. You can communicate a lot with a person without being able to speak their language, though. You really can, certainly in terms of intent, in terms of, general disposition towards a person. I've literally been on an island off China, Hainan Island, that's what it was called. There's an indigenous people who live there, and everyone travelling around China, there are lots of different dialects and languages, and they don't all necessarily understand each other, but they can all read the script. So what they do is like, if they can't talk to you, like, they'll just get a piece of paper. Or in this case, I was talking to this woman who was selling something on the beach. So she just made the sand flat and started drawing Chinese symbols. And I was like, mate, that's not helping me at all. So I showed her my phrase book, and then she called a friend over and they had a little laugh. And they were like, look, her letters are completely different. Right? You could tell what they were talking about. But in this instance, I mean, it was a positive interaction anyway, because I was trying to buy some sort of blousy thing off her. But we had to agree, because obviously I'm not shaped like a Chinese woman. So therefore they were going to have to make me one, because she kind of looked at me and went, like, you are enormous, no way. And so she's like, and then we were discussing, we had a whole conversation about colour, and I went, what about this colour? I was pointing at things, and then she pointed to my face and kind of went, no, it doesn't suit you. Like we had quite a, not in-depth philosophical or political conversation, but we were able to talk to each other without being able to speak the same words. So I think it's about
trade
intent.
But also trade is the first place that this becomes a bottleneck, isn't it? And so I think there'll be like a lot of
more goodwill, positive. There's
positive, a lot more effort made on both sides, I suppose. I want to kind of like trade something with this person. I'm going to like make an effort and come up with something.
I suppose there is that. But it is intent. It's like, a border guard can communicate a lot without speaking at all to make you feel pretty awful. So I don't think language is our biggest barrier. I think language it's about intent. It's about
I also think that like just because like someone speaks English doesn't mean I'm going to be able to communicate with them either. Like sometimes it's like I've got nothing to say to you because it's not the words, it's the mindset, it's the values, it's the sort of like it's their the gravity. Like where are they starting from? Is it just too far away from? But that's why I don't know, like, oh, I'm so special. I find the prospect of socialising with new people quite tiring because I feel like I've always got so much to, like, people will think that I mean something. I'll be like, no, because, it'll be because we've had conversations on this. We have our ways of looking at the world that I don't think are very universal. And sometimes people will just jump to a different conclusion and I won't feel understood. And I'll just feel like I've got a lot of like legwork to lay down before we're going to have a common base of understanding. So, it's just like on Friday, I went to the pub with a couple of people and like I haven't done that for ages, but there's sort of people I don't know that well yet. And there is a lot of just like kind of crossing, they sort of think you mean one thing and I try and say, well, actually it's more like this. And then it's like, oh, and then they'll kind of sort of kind of jump to some other conclusion. And I'll just find that quite exhausting. Like if you don't sort of like buy into the generally recognized narrative mindset frame of reference, then it does become a lot harder to be social if you actually care about, I don't know, it depends what you're trying to do. Like I value, I'm not that into sort of casual friendships. I kind of like someone that I can really talk to about stuff in a bit more detail.
I'm thinking about the my version of this or how I experience what you're talking about. And I think, I was going to say, what you said about not everyone thinks the same way. I'm constantly shocked by how many people are utterly oblivious to the climate catastrophe. They're like, just not either oblivious or just think, well, they'll sort it. It'll be sorted out. It'll be fine. And but the surprise comes at me from lots of different angles. So you get that because Croatia is a developing country, really, in many ways, and so everyone wants to go shopping. It's not so therefore, but it is. They're like, oh, I bet in England when you have sales, they're really good. And I'm like, you're asking the wrong person. And then I've got a moment where I go, do I take this as an opportunity to say, actually, I try and avoid buying new things?
Yeah.
Or do I take this, or I just go, oh, well, and then maintain the friendship with the hope that 3, 4, 5 conversations down the road, I'll be able to go, actually, I try not to buy anything. Because it's kind of because in England, I have in Brighton, let's be geographically specific. Yeah. I went into this shop where I used to enjoy, a boutique where I used to enjoy buying things. And I popped in one day and they've got a pre-loved rail. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can buy myself something. So I bought myself this nice thing. Then I went back, 3 months later, and I was like, well, what's happened to your pre-loved rail? And she went, oh, yeah, it didn't really pan out. But there's a sale rail. And I said, yeah, but it's not about money. It's about not buying new things. And she went, yeah, I know. I was like, well, so do something about it. You still want my trade. So it's kind of but that's not somebody I'm trying to be friends with. So,
here's the thing: is like there is like, what's your agenda? And I mean, we're kind of like a little bit off topic, but it's something that was on, like, kind of was keeping me up a bit on Friday night. Was like talking to this person who was like coming out with some slightly Jordan Peterson stuff here and there, but it was like someone that seems to want to be my friend, and like we've certainly got a lot more in common than I think than I don't know. He's like a musician, but I will just go in first, with the, well, I don't agree with that. But then I was just like, what am I hoping to achieve here by going? And he's like, oh, why are you trying to make me feel guilty or this? Oh, now I'm going to think about that. And then, oh, you can have not understanding like what the point of feminism is, not understanding that if that you can't say something's a meritocracy really without understanding that doesn't really exist if you because like your circumstances are such and there's all these things that we kind of know, but they're sort of like counterintuitive, some of them, and there's just things you have to have come across. So it's like, how much, like, if I'm going to have a relationship with this person, I kind of need them to at least be aware of some of these things. So I'm sort of hoping just by mentioning these things that they'll be interested in the idea of learning more about, or just knowing, oh, right, okay, that's a thing that I could find out more about. But then coming up against this like massive defensiveness and like, oh, you know, oh, are you going to have a go at me for being a man now? Like, well, no, why would I do that? Like, what's that got to do with anything? Like, just it's a long way to go to sort of like get to the advanced interpersonal understanding. And then I'm just thinking, I mean, maybe I'm just spoiled because I get to kind of have these conversations with you every week. And like you know, my relationships that I do have are with people that, you know, I've kind of gone over all that now, and I don't have to go over all that again.
But I think there's two. I think we've spoken before about the fact that you can't really let it lie. But kind of,
yes, we have talked about
you know,
that.
and you kind of you sort of have to. But I think you have to find a way of, like with my in this conversation around shopping and sales, I think my lack of enthusiasm for the conversation said something, and generally then I throw into conversation where they go, oh, you know, they'll just say something. I go, oh yeah, we've parked our van over there because we haven't actually had to start it now for a month because I just go into the shops on my bike, and then I'll throw in, oh, I'm on the front line of environmental activism, you know, what, do you know what I mean? And I get them, so I try, you know, but I think it is really hard because sometimes
you can't just let it lie because it's never going to happen. But it's exhausting. But it's just about getting on the same page so that you can communicate, so that everything you say isn't like misinterpreted and then they go off. Especially if it's someone ranty that will start explaining something to you that's just like like they're just talking for 5 minutes and then you're like, yeah, no, that wasn't my point. Like we've just wasted that 5 minutes, you know. I
wonder sometimes though if if it's more difficult for two men talking versus two women talking. Is it harder because there's this like, who, you know, Bullhorns thing? You know, is there a bit of that especially in the beginning?
I think so, and I think it's like, you know, I'm not going to swallow I find it hard to swallow a misunderstanding. I find it hard to just say, oh, yeah, even though, like, if someone didn't understand at all. But then what I was surprised, you know, it takes a lot of energy to try and lay that groundwork down, and I just felt like, oh, I've actually got time to have a proper conversation. Like, I'm not got someone waiting for me to deliver some work. I'm not technically at work. I can just like stand up and have a chit chat in the afternoon. So I'm going to use this time. I'm going to give this person my attention for like as long as it takes to kind of get these ideas across. And I'm sure I think it's, you know, he just sent me another thing this morning. Like I don't think I like alienated him by any stretch of the imagination, but like it took an awful lot of energy to just kind of like get to like to just chip away at like having a sort of common groundwork to work on, where like I didn't have to just kind of someone kind of going, oh, this woman was like gave me a hard time for not putting there not being any women on the bill. Oh, it's just a matriarchy. It's like, is that what you said? Yeah, have you seen the world? Have you seen the world, mate? Like, do you even know what?
Yeah. Well, I had a slightly different. I need to look this up actually because I've been letting my daughter watch some Croatian telly because, you know, it helps with the whole language thing. And I was like, and it's not often, I really do love being able to put her in front of CBeebies for a bit because there's no ads and I don't have to worry about what she's having sold at her. And I was sitting in front of this telly with her, and the most sexist ad that I have seen for a very, like, jaw-droppingly sexist ad came on, and I was like, what is this? Anyway, I was round at my I'm going to write an angry letter, but it was like I was talking to my...
Are you going to tell us what this ad actually
Well, basically,
had in it,
they were selling a ride-on lawnmower, right? And there was a woman dressed up to the nines riding this thing, waving to her neighbour, who is a sort of elegantly dressed middle-aged man, whose maid was kneeling on the floor, looking up to him and saying, "Boss, can I have one of those, please?"
Wow.
I was like, hello? Fuck off. You cannot broadcast this in 2019.
But this is a thing, there's language, but then there's like the signal to noise of communicating between languages but also like values of a culture, of a society, of like, here are our standards. Like gender is a continuous thing. That's what you have to be aware of now if you're going to have a grown-up conversation. Like, there's all these things that as soon as that immediately get lost in translation. I think that's going to be the next hurdle, isn't it? We're going to be able to understand each other's words, but we're going to end up like locking horns on these values.
But this is a parody of real. Like it's not a parody. It was I don't know what it was. Their idea of humour. I don't know. It was like Benny Hill. It was that era of humour. But then I sat down with my late father's best friend who lives in the village, which is how we're here in the first place. And I told him about it, and he said, and then he launched into this big, launched in a way that an old man who's read lots of history books does, sort of into a story of how Croats are essentially matriarchal, and the myth of Croatian societal development is based around a female figure, not a male figure, and which was quite. That's why I said I need to look it all up. But that's not the direction I expected the conversation to go in. I was more expecting somebody to go, yes, we must write to RTL immediately. He was like, well, funny you should say all that, because it's just for show. Really, the Croats are matriarchs, which is definitely true at a family level, but not at a country level.
It's like, and there's only so far they've got a good heart, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
how much you can forgive.
And for it to be on essentially the equivalent to the iPlayer on a kids channel. And I pressed children's cartoons, you know what I mean? It's like, why does she need to see this ever? And certainly not when she's 4.
So language is just one of the hurdles that we're going to have to deal with. Like, once we do have like this machine translation is just sort of available, I think we're going to clash in terms of values and cultural differences. I think we're going to realise that, I think we're going to lose some of the romanticism, the romance with which we see other countries a little bit as well, when we're all kind of like, if we are able to communicate more directly with more people, we're going to be like, you're
not very nice.
I can't say that. Like, just how, I don't know, just hearing about how, like, apparently Japan would rather kind of create robots than allow immigration. You know, there's those sort of like real, like, harsh cultural differences that I think Japan's like really ultra anti-immigration, and it's just not the first thing you'd think of, is it? Like, no. you'd sort of think about the exciting things, but like I think we're gonna come to blows more on the cultural stuff once we've got this problem of not being able to just understand each other's words. So we've got that to look forward to.
A lot to do. A lot of work
to do.
In the meantime,
a lot of people to get woke.
In the meantime, we need to work on that 1.5 degrees business, and then
that's quite important.
That's quite important, and then the rest of it. But these things aren't going to solve themselves. I saw something today. There's been this article out today of how really the amazing impact trees will have on climate, and I go on to those comments of something, and immediately someone goes, "Yes, but the German science says it's not going to be enough." Nobody's saying that it is enough. So I sort of did I'd like to think that people are beginning to realise that there is not one solution to the complex problem. But yeah, it's like, this is all part of life's rich tapestry that I hope we get to continue to weave.
Yes, well, maybe we won't have to deal with it because we'll run the clock out and it'll just be 6 billionaires and their chip implanted
protectors.
Languageless robot servants. Who knows? It's just going to be, I don't know, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk and Siri. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com where you can subscribe. There is a button which is orange. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com and so on, other places, YouTube. What else can people do?
People, it would be really, really kind of you if you would write us some ratings and reviews. It would also be very kind of you if you told your friends. And what's the ultimate act of kindness to me and Michael is to go to patreon.com/grandpodcast and perhaps consider making a small donation. I shall be using my donations to make solar panels on my roof. I'll pay somebody to put solar panels on my roof. So there's quite a way to go, everybody.
Yeah, well, first we've got some infrastructure costs, and then, let's buy us some solar panels. Come on.
Buy me some solar panels. Look, I want to help save the world.
Keep my freedom going so I don't have to go back and support the growth industry. All the growth economies.
The gross industry.
Gross industries. There's a PayPal link as well if you
you're like one of the billionaires who wants to distribute some of the wealth, just go for PayPal and go for it. Big check.
If you don't believe we would put that to good use, then I don't know what I can say, because I think we've shown that we've got lots of ideas. There's just not enough time, not enough space. I've got a bit more time and space. I just need more allies.
Oh, there you go.
All right, thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.